Well, I guess in Marcia's comments last night, I think she was talking about a couple of different things. She mentioned in particular CDEP, which is the Community Development Employment Project Scheme, and that's something which has been around since the 1970s. It's a program which actually has operated sort of instead of a Work for the Dole program in a lot of Aboriginal communities. And essentially that's a way where people have, rather than getting paid unemployment benefits on an individual basis, the equivalent of those payments has been paid in sort of a block grant to an incorporated organisation, and that organisation has been able to employ people on local projects in the community for the equivalent of the unemployment benefits, but paid as a basic wage.
And do you think this is a good idea?
Well, I think it's probably had variable impacts where it's operated, but by and large I think you can say that it's certainly had some positive impacts, and part of it depends on how well it's been managed, I guess, at the local level. But certainly in some cases it's been used to good effect, keeping people actively employed in the local community to do things that the community has seen as priorities. So that might be things like vegetable gardens or maintenance of the public areas, keeping the town tidy. It might be setting up enterprises. So some people have used it to act sort of like a wage subsidy to set up cultural tourism enterprises or other sorts of commercial businesses, arts production, for example, or collecting and selling firewood, those sorts of things. And it's also been used to provide training for people so they could get paid a CDP payment while they're training to find other employment, and it's certainly been the case that CDP has been effective in getting some people into mainstream jobs, moving off CDP once they've got some experience.
And based on your knowledge, do many Aboriginals rely on welfare programs?
Well, I think, I guess it depends on whereabouts in the country, and particularly in remote areas where there isn't much in the way of alternative employment. There is a high reliance on different sorts of welfare benefits, and some people might be on unemployment benefits or parenting payments or other sorts of payments. Certainly CDP has played a really big role, particularly in remote areas where a lot of the employment has come through that scheme. And of course there's also employment in service provision and other sorts of jobs, and people who've been willing and able to move away from their communities to find other employment, whether it's in mining or farming or manufacturing or wherever else they can find work.
Marcia Langton has asked for a revision of the conditions that warrant welfare programs to Australian Aboriginals. She thinks that welfare should be granted to those who are economically disadvantaged rather than being simply of an Aboriginal descent. Do you think that this is a good idea?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I guess where my concern is, Marcia has talked about some of the concerns she has with CDEP, and those are certainly concerns that are shared by other people, that in some cases maybe it's provided some sort of disincentive for people finding other work, and some people might have been trapped in that program effectively rather than going out and looking for other jobs. And I think that's a legitimate concern and one that we should look at. But my concern is if the reaction to that is then to scrap the program, we need to think about what replaces it. And what's, in my experience, what's happened around the country where that program has been closed over the last few years, actually the system that's replaced it hasn't been any more effective and actually has created a whole set of other problems. So it's certainly cases where I've been looking where CDP has been removed, you've got a situation where the enterprises that have been set up have closed. People who had been gainfully employed with CDP on local community projects are no longer employed, and that work's not being done around the community. So people have expressed to me concern about the community going backwards since they've lost CDP. So I think if we're going to talk about an alternative model, we need to think really carefully about what that model is going to be and how it's going to provide more effective support for people finding jobs than CDP has.
And do you have any suggestions?
Look, it's a really difficult question. I guess when I've been looking at this program and the shift away from CDP onto newer systems, one of the things that people have raised as a really important issue is how you keep people engaged. And I think particularly in remote areas, but also in metropolitan areas or regional areas where there isn't a strong labour market, that's really one of the challenges of trying to come up with a system which does keep people engaged. And I think, Marcia Langton has talked about that too, of trying to keep people actively involved rather than, people concerned about sit-down money. And CDP, I think, has been often quite effective in getting people actively engaged, getting them, encouraging them to get up and do work around the community where they feel a sense of pride. And where CDP has closed, I think that's part of what's been lost. A lot of people have gone back to sit-down money. They've lost that sense of pride in the community, that they're, not feeling the same sense of purpose as they did when they had a CDP job to go to. So I think that's probably a key thing that needs to be thought about in trying to come up with a new system, how you're actually going to get the community engaged and involved in that system. And probably that means going to the local community level and talking to people about what they need.